Welcome to another episode of the Flats Nation podcast. And a big shout out to Brother Dave Fader down Amarada for the awesome music. You can check out more of Dave's phenomenal work on davidfader.com. Well, good afternoon. This is your guide on Flats Nation, Dave Legier, and today we have another member of the Flats Nation team joining us. She, y'all guys, pay attention, class is in session now, is well-versed in the sport, travels worldwide picking fights with tarpon and other species on the fly rod. So right in from the wilds of South New Jersey, we have Dr. Ashley Dentler with us. Welcome aboard. How are you today?
Thanks, Dave. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great. Let's get started.
Awesome.
So where and when did you get your start fishing, and who taught you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I can remember most, it's probably when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and had a little Fisher Price rod that clipped onto a little tackle box.
Oh, and, God, yes.
Yeah. And my dad would let me kind of go out and play with a bunch of little periwinkles, and I used to smash them up. I, lived in Rhode Island growing up, so I'd grab some periwinkles and throw them on a hook and, just see what I could get my hands on. I used to walk down there by myself. And then Dad taught me how to progress to a more conventional spin reel. I wouldn't say it was anything special, but something Walmart you could produce.
The good old Mitchell 300.
Exactly. And I was always fascinated by the colors of those artificials. So I'd always ask him, can we go to the tackle shop and go find some fun colors of artificials? I used to collect them. But then we kind of progressed to a couple of day charters, my mom and some of her family, to go do some flounder fishing and some blue fishing. So probably, young age, but, I at least was adventurous from the beginning, trying my own.
So now, when did you take up fly fishing in this? And it's usually a progression with everybody, but I'm just curious for you. When did you start that aspect of it?
Yeah, fast forward several years. So I grew up in Rhode Island, but then moved to Colorado after college. And, a couple of friends out there had, been fly fishermen or were at least trying it. So I dabbled in it a little bit, trying on the rivers there. But really, I was actually invited by a girlfriend of mine who found out that this local fly shop was hosting this night called Fish and Chicks. And it was casting
I love
lessons.
the marketing on that.
Oh, I know. It was really catchy. So we got a couple of girls to go and try it. And, of course, they had wine and cheese and crackers and pepperoni and stuff, so a little charcuterie. And after that experience with a bunch of ladies and having a blast, I was totally hooked. So it was in Colorado about, I'd call it, probably 11 years ago-ish.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So now, how did you get your interest in fly fishing in saltwater? What inspired you to start on that journey?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough. So my husband and I, started to get a little bit of an itch to move from fresh to salt. And we'd had a couple trips that were planned into Nicaragua area over on the Pacific coast. And we said, you know what, why don't we get a couple of bigger rods and see what kind of trouble we can get ourselves into out in the salt. And so, at the time we moved on from fishing with my ladies and kind of got further into the trout game. And I said, there's some bigger fish in the ocean that seemed like might be a lot of fun. So, man, this is a long time ago, but we had our way with some unbelievable saltwater fish right off of these huge rocks and reefs in Nicaragua. And after that, I was like, this is where we need to be spending our time. This is what we want to be doing. And
exactly,
kind of took off from there.
Yeah, let's pick a fight with a couple sea monsters. I get it.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
What have been some of your best and probably most challenging experiences with fly fishing, especially as you were learning the sport and coming up through the ranks?
Yeah, awesome question. So I'll go with the challenging and then I'll go with the best. But I think our most challenging, but I have to preface it's also the best, was my first time fighting a tarpon in Florida. I was weak in the knees. I saw them. They were daisy chaining and, of course, flubbed the first cast. It was too short. And then I put another one out there, too long. But then, trying to get myself to take a deep breath, I got that perfect one right in the middle and connected with that fish and fought her for about an hour-ish. And right as I leadered her, she broke off. So I was fighting this thing and was like, oh my gosh, we're going to make it. And then boom, she was gone. So that was one of the challenging, but it was also one of the best learning experiences for sure.
Oh, I bet. Nothing like picking a fight with a spoon to bring you back to reality. That's for sure.
Yep. And so then I did get a second redemption when we went down into Nicaragua, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But then I got a chance with some giant tarpon, and I was not going to let anything happen to that leader. So we fought that one for quite some time, and we did end up getting that face grab and really landing that tarpon. It was absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. So turned a challenging moment of learning into a best moment for sure.
Exactly. And we'll cover this topic a little bit later on, more in depth. But for the ladies listening, what was the hardest aspect for you to overcome in your fly fishing experience and journey?
Yeah, so it goes back to when you're asking about the best. And I'd say some of the hardest is just actually finding other women that are out there that are passionate about fly fishing specifically.
Right.
And what I mean by that are just fishy women. They're excited about it. They want to learn more. They are intrigued, not turned off. And women that are not, afraid. They're willing to be vulnerable. They're willing to be, coached, or they're willing to not know everything. Right. It's really, really hard to find that community of people and women specifically that are just saying, you know what, I don't know everything. I want to continue to learn. And going back to your question, what's been the best experiences for me is I've actually found some of those women. They have come more recently in my, fishing career, and the community of people that I've now found through this have been some of the most life-changing individuals in my life. And so, yes, fly fishing has been our connection,
right?
But just the caliber of person who's willing to go out there and say, I'm going to do this unapologetically. It's been the hardest thing to find them, but now it's been the most rewarding thing that I can say that fishing has given me as a gift.
Oh, I would much rather flats fish. And I've had several women I've taken out and flats fish with them. They're the best students. They don't have preconceived ideas. Some of the guys said, well, Dave, this is how I've been doing it for the last 30 years. I go, yeah, and you've been doing it wrong. But be that as it may.
Exactly.
Side chucking a live shrimp. I'm like, we're not here side chucking shrimp, brother. We're out here to try to make casts and cover water. But I get it. Tell us the origin story of flats fishing at Island Fly, how that progressed.
Yeah, sure. I would have to say South Jersey is not super known for fly fishing. So it's a great question.
Not at all.
Yeah. So, like I was saying, we started fly fishing in Colorado and kind of got the itch for some salt early on. And then pretty simply, Jason and I are both from the East Coast, and we knew at some point we wanted to be back closer to family. And so, we had some things that were changing in our lives. So we said, you know what, now might be the time to do it. So we kind of pointed out a map and said, we saw the Brigantine area, which is the island that we live in South Jersey, which is a barrier island. And, it's 6 miles long, connected by only one bridge. And, sometimes it's only a block wide. And everything else around Brigantine, it's small. But everything around Brigantine is all these sandy, flat bottoms and, these marshes that are behind us and tidal creeks. And we said, you know what, that's it. That's going to be where we land. So that's kind of how we, landed in Brigantine. And we knew that we wanted to start Island Fly in an area that was going to give us that natural access, the natural world access that we were looking for. So it was kind of a X marks the spot sort of origin story.
Well, it's an interesting area. I mean, I've looked at it on Google Earth and things of that nature, and I agree with you. It's other than that island, there's not much around you, which is not what I would think most people think of when they think of coastal New Jersey, or as they call it, the shore.
Yeah.
It's boardwalks and buildings, and it's just overdeveloped in the whole 9 yards. So when you think about that, finding that location there, that's unusual, but that's why it has the fishing that it has. Tell me,
Exactly.
what's the difference between your approach at Island Fly as compared to, let's say, other guides that fish in that area?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, fly fishing is not really a known thing or a prominent thing in this area. So the other guides that are around us are really the guides that you'll go out more in the deep water.
Right.
They're either trolling or they're targeting the fish that are off the canyons that are much further out, miles. And so they have these larger boats and they're taking sometimes more guests, sometimes just a few, but either way, they're larger, big V-hull boats that have to go out deep. So they don't have the ability to access some of the areas that we can with our boat. So we sneak into all of the backcountry water and the flat water where really we're probably the only boat out there for, a couple hundred square miles.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Everybody else
So
just has too much water. I get it.
Exactly. So we kind of give them a wave as they make their way out and we stay in the back, which is great. So our focus is really more of that inshore, the flat tidal creeks, the marshes, the sand islands that emerge only at low tides. We can have access to all of that, which provides us with great fly fishing opportunity in that area. So we actually like to call it that it's, yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, it's really, you've cut yourself out a little niche there, taking advantage of what is there water wise. I mean, the Northeast has flats and saltwater fly fishing, maybe not as prevalent as Florida or the Bahamas or Mexico. And, as we've discussed in the past, New Jersey just really isn't known as a flats or a fly fishing destination. What do you feel is special about that part of New Jersey and particularly Brigantine area as a whole? Is it the remoteness of it? What's the special sauce?
Sure. So we coined it that it's hips. It's hidden in plain sight.
Sure.
What's really special about Brigantine? Yeah, it's right there. And people just they don't see it because the eyes only see what the mind knows in some ways. And so you're thinking, oh, I'm going to go out on a fishing charter. I'm going to go out deep because that's what people do here.
Right.
Versus if you just look in your backyard, there's so much untapped resource and just, pristine marshes. So what's really special about Brigantine when you think about its location is that, like I said, it's a barrier island and we have 150,000 acres of preserved land. So there's nothing that can be built behind us, which maintains that beautiful estuary, and it's a bird sanctuary. The Edwin Forsyth and the Jacques Cousteau Preserve Land gives us that pristine water. And so we have about 200 square miles of just protected marsh and nature behind us. So it's
that's awesome.
Incredibly unique. Yeah. So it makes the fishery in this estuary system incredibly healthy. The tidal creeks, they always are turning over all of the bivalves, the mollusks and the clams, the mussels, et cetera, the mud flats. So the other really unique part about the Brigantine area is that we also have the Mullica River, which empties out right into this area we call Great Bay. So you have this perfect mix of fresh and salt water that just makes it this heaven to create such a perfect and healthy fishery for us. So it's really, really unique, our setup where we are.
Along those lines, what fish are you usually targeting and when in that area?
Yeah, so depends on the time of year, like most places in the world.
Sure.
It's different fish depending on weather and water temperature and seasons. So typically in our spring and in our fall, we're looking for stripers.
Okay.
They're much greater Yeah, greater in abundance during that time of year, but just because of their natural runs from Chesapeake Bay up north and then, from the north back south again. So we typically follow them. And then in the summertime, it's actually been really fun. Summertime, we've been targeting some flounder on the fly, which are incredibly aggressive and really fun.
And good dinner,
and then
too.
We've got this, oh my gosh, yes, if you keep them, yep. And then we have these summertime blues that run, so they're really fun to catch, and they're, put your wire on because they'll give you a run for your money.
Oh, yeah, they're marauders.
Yeah, and then we also, in the summer, we'll see some sharks that are around. And recently we've been having a ton of fun with some cow-nosed rays on the fly, and holy cow, are they strong. So we've had a really, really fun summer run for some of these fish.
What time of the year do you feel is best if somebody wants to plan a trip with y'all to come there? And that's a heavily populated area. I mean, there's a lot of people within a day's drive, that's for sure. What do you feel is the best time of year for them to come and fish?
So fishing, it depends on what you're looking for. But if you are, a pretty avid angler, or you're a pretty seasoned angler, depending on which fish, we're going to tell you which season. But if you're looking for the iconic, coastal town, summertime with the water's warm, the weather's nice, the summer's great. But like I said, if you're going for a target species for fish, stripers and blues are definitely in the fall. And then if you want summertime fun, it's flounders and, like the occasional ray. So we can put fish, put you on some fish year round. But if you want your summertime beach cruiser, bicycle, and ice cream experience, it's probably more summertime. Yeah.
So your record size targets for the fly rod in those waters are, I'm going to assume, the spring and fall runs for stripers. Is that basically what you're targeting?
Yeah. So if you're looking for record size stuff, you're going to go spring and fall for stripers, or you can also get some record bluefish. But flounder, record size flounder will fill up your dinner plate pretty quickly too if you're keeping them. So they're fun to have. Yeah.
In that area for stripers, another target that you're casting towards, what are your top flies? What am I going to find that's in the top tray of your tackle bag?
It's a good question. So we've experimented a little bit, and not only is it my favorite, but it's also been one of the most productive. Is for striper and for flounder is a chartreuse tarpon toad, and it's the funniest thing because they're such different fish, but they are crazy about this thing. So I've caught more striper and flounder on that one fly than anything else.
That's interesting. I mean, do you have a prey species in those waters that it imitates, or is it just something so different? They're like, oh, I'm just got to go jump that dude.
It's a great question. I can't think of anything that's super chartreuse looking.
Okay.
You've got your little spearing and stuff, but I think they're just excited and interested by it. And the way that it kind of moves in the water, it's a really good looking fly.
Tarpon love them.
But of course, I always use, oh yeah, they sure do. But if it's not a tarpon toad, then I'm going with some clousers or any, bait fish pattern around this area. They are the go-tos. So
now what weight fly tackle are you throwing most of the time? I mean, are you carrying multiple weight rods on the skiff, ready to grab one as needed?
Yeah. So, depending on the season, I'm going to bring a couple of different rods. For stripers, I'm, typically using the 8 or 9 weight, just have some fun. Bluefish, same thing. I might go up more to a 9. Flounder, we've been having fun on the 6 weight.
Oh, I bet.
And then, yeah. And then for rays, we're going 10 or 11 weight. These guys are pretty aggressive and strong.
Pretty heavy too.
And yeah, we're going like a straight 50 on those pound tests. So, and they love crab flies, which is super cool. So we call them the Brigantine permit because they strip very similar to permit, and they take crabs. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, do you have to?
Uh-huh.
I mean, I have to think that the presentation on them has got to be a little bit unusual because, they can't really see it when they're eating it. Their mouth is over the top of it. I mean, are you adding any kind of scent, or this is a strip like a tarpon and waiting for them to hit it?
It's no scent.
Right.
It's truly using the sandy color, sometimes green crab patterns that you would use for a permit down in Mexico. And it is such a slow strip that it's almost like you think you're going slow and you have to turn it down even more. So it gives them something to look at. You kind of might jerk it just a little to catch their eye. But you're right, they're kind of coming over the top and, they're taking something in to crush it. So you want to get them, you want to catch their attention, but then you want to go really, really slow to give them that chance to just kind of pull it in.
Just crawl.
Yep, exactly. And the way they take it, it almost feels like they're just kissing it, and you got to be ready to set. So it's a tricky one. It's a really fun one, but it's really tricky.
It is a lot like permit fishing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very much so. Very much so.
Oh, that's awesome. We'll definitely have to come up around to give that a whirl.
Mm-hmm.
You hear a lot about striped bass conservation efforts in your area. What is the major concern? What do our listeners need to know?
Great question. This has been an incredibly hot topic across the whole, Atlantic coast, to be honest. But from the facts of what needs to be understood is that we're all going to be better off if there's more fish in the water.
Sure.
And right now, there's a significant jeopardy in the number of fish that are going to sustain for, years and generations to come. So there has been, new legislation that's passed recently to decrease that slot size. So, I personally believe more fish, better for all of us, whether you catch and release or whether you keep. So any effort that's going to help to conserve the numbers of fish that are staying in the water, I'm all for. But yeah, the big takeaway is, the abundance is where we're going to have sustainability, and that's really what's in jeopardy right now.
Now, are they a fish, and I may have asked your husband of this, are they a fish that goes through a sex change so that basically the slot limit is designed to keep you from, if you do keep one, you're basically keeping males, you're not keeping females as they get larger? Is that the design intent with these changes to the slot, or are they just trying to overall population controls what they're trying to accomplish?
Well, it's both, twofold. So if you're keeping the fish in the water that are under that slot size, you're giving them the opportunity to then have the reproductive age of which we would want to keep. So the big ones are the big breeding females.
Sure.
So once they get over that slot size, you're giving them the chance to stay in the water and continue to reproduce. Anything under that slot size, same thing. You're giving them a chance to eventually or hopefully mature. But that slot size now it's pretty thin. So it gives the entire population a chance, whether it's, sex change up to then I am an actual breeding fish, gives them all a chance to stay in the water a little bit longer.
Do we know as a species how big those fish get before they actually start to breed and lay eggs? Do we know what that size is?
Oh, catching me without my Google reference. It's going to be, so for all those listeners, don't hold me to it. Write this down in pencil, not in pen. But it's over that slot limit. So okay. They're able to reproduce at the higher limits of, it's going to be, I don't want to give you a number. Let me get back to you on that one.
That's fine. I was just curious because I know, like here in Florida, we have a slot size for both snook and redfish, and the design intent on them is to, keep the females in the water. Some of them have just been flat out closed because of the water quality issues that we're battling with naturally. But I get it. So let me guess, any fish on the fly rod's great. But what's your favorite? Is it poons? Is it stripers? What's your drug of choice?
Sure. So I'm going to answer this based off of where in the world I might be.
I like that pre-qualifier.
I guess I just don't really want to pick one. So when I'm at home, it's for sure stripers on the fly. I mean, that is, to me, it's just so iconic. It's so Northeast saltwater fly fishing. It's just the way you do it, the getting up early in the morning or staying out late at night, the crisp weather when the stripers are coming in, whether it's spring crisp or it's fall crisp, like that to me just makes me so happy. But, if I'm traveling, if I happen to find myself in Nicaraguan jungle, then I'm going to go for, for giant
I got that on a
tarpon.
bucket list. Ever since Jason and I started talking about that, I said, brother, I need to do that. Those big jungle poons are huge.
Oh my gosh. And they are so, so fun. But yeah, for sure, it's going to be the giant tarpon. It's such an adventure from truly every angle. I mean, not only just being there, but being in that nature and the howler monkeys on top of you and, the fish that are rolling. It's such an experience.
Oh, yeah, it's jungle warfare at its finest.
Oh gosh, yeah. You truly realize how small you are in the world when you're in a place like that.
Very true.
The challenge is the nature, it's the fish, it's all of it. It's the culture. It's just such an experience. So for me, it's how it makes me feel, whether it's stripers in the spring or the fall, or it's the feeling small in the Nicaraguan jungle. Those are prime.
And I guess this is a pretty good time to have this related type of question. How does your experience in medicine and management help in supporting Island Fly? And I know we're going to do a follow-on show where we talk about traveling to these different exotic locales, but how does that help you running Island Fly right now?
Yeah, sure. So I am a physical therapist by education. So, and then I'm also a project manager, which is I kind of blended two different worlds.
Awesome.
Now working in health. Yeah, working in healthcare now for 15 years. So it's been an interesting blend of how do you bring, your PT skills and your clinical knowledge as well as your organization and management knowledge and build a business. So it's actually been really helpful. So the physical therapist brain or the clinician brain definitely helps when it comes to not only just day to day, staying strong, staying fit. How do you make sure that you're ready to get up and get on a boat or pushing on the beaches and push pulling all day, every day? Keeping myself and keeping Jason healthy. Yeah, for sure. It's a very physical job. So the clinician in me for sure helps in that sense. It definitely helps thinking about, well, what can go wrong when we think about hosted trips and how do you prepare yourself and get ready for that? How do you keep your guests and your clients healthy, and what types of things can you give them tips and tricks to stay healthy and nurse any old injuries or give them some tips while you're out there too, on the boat. But then the management side really comes into play when we're talking about how do we run day-to-day operations? Can we, make things a little easier for us? Do we build our systems? In the morning we get up and we do this and we do this. And what kind of resources do we have to really run the day-to-day operations and the organizational elements that we need for sure to do hosted trips? Because there's all kinds of things that you have to make sure that you've dialed in and you've checked that box, and not only you've got yourself ready to go, you've got, the gear ready to go, you've got your clients ready to go. So a lot of this is just systematic processes that we've put into place that keeps us very, very dialed in. So it's been a fun blend.
I bet. And I'm quite sure that is quite a pre-flight checklist to make sure that everything is dialed in pre-trip, post-trip, during the trip, emergency, whatever the case may be. I would hate to see how long those checklists are. Probably many pages.
It's extensive. Yep. And every country can sometimes be just a little different. So yeah, it's been pre-trip planners, it's gear and clothing planners, and make sure that your itinerary, you're checking this checklist, and it's been fun to put together. Over the years of us traveling. And so now we've got it pretty dialed in, which is really nice. So it's a wash, rinse, repeat approach when we get a chance to do this with new people. Yeah.
Well, I bet that would make for an interesting book. I'd like to read that myself. Just that learning curve of developing these trips and all the things that you need to take and factor in, whether it's the guest health or where you're traveling to, or, just the travel aspect alone, whether it's passports or I bet it's a job, a big job to make sure that one of those trips gets pulled off correctly, for sure.
It is a big job. I'll keep that book in mind. I'll stash that away with our next to-do list.
Yeah. Number 485 in the top 500, I bet too.
There you go.
So now
No,
how do
it's
you,
definitely been a lesson learned.
I
So
bet.
it's been fun.
How do you balance all of this? Your passion for fly fishing with all these other responsibilities, work, run an island, fly, travel. How does this all work?
Yeah, good question. I mean, our answer is no different than anybody else, I'm sure. It's a team effort. It's, constant communication. It's a conversation that we have often in our house, at least, thinking about what is your priority? What's our priorities? What's the priorities for the business, for our life, and balancing
Sure.
all those things. And so it's just making sure that you keep priorities, at the top of the list, and we're spending our time and energy on those things, and actually recognizing and calling out the things that might just start to creep in there. Say, maybe we need to say no or not now to that. So
Exactly. Yeah, that dog don't hunt. I get it.
Yeah, it's keeping those calendars up to date, and just making sure that we're communicating together to say, okay, how do we divide and conquer between the two of us so we make sure that we're hitting all the things we need to hit, and also making the time for the stuff that's important for us to do to reset and recharge, because then we can be much better at putting all of our time and energy into running Island Fly.
I bet. I get, if you're not careful, you could get into a burnout situation pretty quickly.
Exactly.
Talk to me about some gear now. What are you fond of using, and any go-to recommendations for the lady angler who's new to the sport? What do you recommend to somebody who's calling you up and saying, "I'd love to go fishing. What do I need to do? What do I need to bring?" Those types of questions.
Yeah. Well, I'll answer it a couple ways. So if anybody wants to come out with us, with me, we have everything. So if you're brand new, I am so excited to be the person to say, come on board. We'll bring you along. You bring yourself a couple things for some clothes that I'll make sure you bring just for weather, and then we've got the rest because we'll teach you. For someone who is more seasoned and they already have gear, we'll talk through that. Depending on which fish and what time of year and weather there may be, we'll change what rods, weights, lines, et cetera,
Sure.
depending on, the fish that we're targeting. But yeah, just go back to kind of if you say the beginning, the lady who wants to get into this and they've never gone fly fishing, or they're just starting to get into it, throw away the rods and reel ideas. How do I just show up to be on the boat?
Yeah, just jump on the skiff and go fishing. I love it.
Right. And the number one thing I'm going to always tell them, I don't care if it's 90 degrees outside, you're bringing a rain jacket.
Oh, yes.
One of my biggest things is you never know. If you don't like the weather in any one location, typically it takes about 5 minutes and it'll change.
It's
so
true. Especially around that area. I've seen that myself.
Exactly. Yeah. So the one thing that can really dampen the day, no pun intended, is rain. So if you've got a jacket, you've got more ability to stay out there and still enjoy. So really investing in a good rain jacket is going to be my number one recommendation. And if you start getting into it more and you love the fishing, being on the boat or being out there in the elements, I live and die by my rain pants. So you can tell my theme. I don't like to be cold or wet. So
I get it.
Yeah, the rain jacket and rain pants. And really the last thing is just a good pack that you can, waterproof pack that you can put the stuff in that you just don't want to get wet. Whether it's a spare, set of clothes or your phone or things like that. Anything that's water and weatherproof is going to be the best, bang for your buck for sure.
We seem to forget sometimes how some of the smallest things that happened when we were kids carry on into our adult life. And I'll never forget this. When I was who knows how young I was at the time, and it was raining. And I said, well, Dad, why are we going fishing? It's raining. He says, fish don't care. They're already wet. Every time I think about that, I'm like, I get that logic. I got it, Dad. I understand. Mm-hmm. They don't care. They're already wet. So it's
exactly. And you know what? It's such a simple thing, and it makes such a difference to have, a really good day stay awesome, or a really good day just comes to a screeching halt, because if you're not prepared for that weather change,
that's right.
You can pretty much guarantee you're done.
Yeah.
So.
And I've seen worse when I was in the military. So yeah, you can get hurt pretty quick. Is there any
Yeah,
local
get
fly
hurt. It's
shops
cold.
that you all work with there on the island, or how does that process work?
That's number 499 on the list.
I bet.
There, there are no fly shops around us.
Interesting.
Tons of, yeah, yeah. And it's fly fishing down here, like we said, is not super popular. It's
Yeah,
not really,
we're getting there.
yeah, exactly. If you build it, they will come. So no fly shops around us, but we do have a great tackle shop right on the island, and there's only one, and it's Riptide Bait and Tackle, and they're fantastic. They are so excited and have been one of the biggest supporters of us in
Awesome.
Brigantine. So huge thanks to them, and we've turned their heads a little bit in favor of fly fishing, especially with the excitement that we've kind of been driving more local business, with people that go back in there and they say, we had such a great time. And, they're really excited for what we're doing. So they're super supportive, even though they don't even have a single fly. But they're super supportive of what we're doing, which makes us really happy.
Oh, that's great. Well, eventually you'll have them have a fly rod section set up in the store.
Yeah, I think we got them excited enough about it. So
Oh, that's
maybe.
great. And I like to classify these as sportswomen specific questions since fish don't know who's on the other end of the line. What are some of the benefits or joys of saltwater fly fishing specifically for the ladies, and how does it empower you and others by participating in that sport?
Sure. So, this could be for, the ladies that are listening. It could be for men, but, fly fishing in general, regardless of gender, it's such an incredible way to experience nature, period.
Very true.
Having the chance to experience it that way and salt water or fresh water, there's really nothing else like it. For those who have seen the iconic movie A River Runs Through It with Tom Skerritt and Brad Pitt, I think they capture the essence of the beauty of fly fishing. And if you take that and you put it in salt or you put it in fresh, it's that natural connection that you have with fly fishing that's so unique and so wonderful.
Very true.
And for me, saltwater fly fishing, I found it brings a whole different element of variables. So I found it super exciting for women specifically. It can be really technical or it can be super simple, but it's endless learning. It's how deep do I want to go? Do I want just one rod and one reel and one line and go and enjoy and stick my feet in the water for a little bit? Great. Or if you want to continue to learn and progress and start to target different species or learn about different fish, it allows you to have full spectrum of how do you want to get into this. But there's beauty in every level. But I think, really for me and maybe for other women that might be listening, it's just been such a transformation for me with the community of other women that I have found that are doing this. Whether it's, bringing the element of fly fishing and that openness to learning and women, and you said it, we love to learn, we love to be coached. We're good at taking feedback, I guess.
Awesome.
Or so I've been told. But man, we also have so much fun doing it. I've rarely come across a lady who's gone out fishing who's, sad or upset that they didn't catch that fish that they wanted. They might be a little, miffed, but they are sharing that story over smiles and laughs. And there's just so much joy that comes from this community. It's infectious. So it's really just fishing can bring women together in such a raw way where you're very vulnerable and you just go and have fun.
Yeah, this is true. Explain to me the Hey Ladies program and those efforts on Island Fly. How does that program work?
Sure. So Hey Ladies is just that. It's a focus on the ladies and getting them out in the water, want to learn, want to just sit and watch. It's just another way for women to come together and to connect. And it can be through fishing. It can be because you had a friend that said they wanted to go and you're just willing to go and hang out and maybe pick up a rod or maybe just sit in the sand and be around other women that are trying it. So really my goal is to be the resource for anyone that's interested in either fly fishing or even conventional light tackle, surf rods, just getting more women with a rod in their hand, whichever one they're comfortable with, to go and have some fun, do something probably different, and to make some friends.
For sure.
Yeah, and get outdoors. And so, and certainly not against any of this, but it's not revolving around, okay, I'm done with work and now we're going to go meet at a bar or restaurant. Right. It's, I'm done with work, or it's the weekend and I want to go outside. I want to do something that's active, maybe something that's different, or maybe something that makes you feel nostalgic from when you were a kid, and share it with other people. So I'm excited to be the resource for people to get to have that type of experience together.
So now, will you,
the fish is a bonus if you get one.
Well, right, exactly. So will you teach her everything needed, even if she's a total newbie to the sport?
100%.
Awesome.
And break it down, make it super easy. If they just want to show up and put a rod in their hand, that's great. If they want to learn a few things, we can do that too. But it's really just getting people out in the water and getting a chance to meet each other.
So how's that starter process work? Somebody, one of the ladies calls you or reaches out to you. I mean, I'm sure you're going to do an early assessment as to what their skill level is, but let's say somebody is totally new and they've never casted a fly rod before. Will you work with her or him ahead of the trip, or how does that process work?
Sure. So kind of that starter process. If you've never done it before and you want to learn, we, number one, have everything you need. So we have all the rods, we have all the reels, we've got all the flies. So you just have to show up. And then, we can bring spares and things like that just in case. But if folks are interested in doing more of a lesson approach, we can do lessons on the beach. We can do lessons on the boat. Because since we're in the skinnier water, we have access to getting on the boat, getting out on sand islands. We have access to getting out on some little marshes. So you don't have to be intimidated by the boat process either. Or if you just want to stay on the beach, we've got some beautiful spots that we can just be on the beach and do some casting and teach you, just some basics. So you feel comfortable being able to get, a 20, 30, 40-foot cast out there after you've spent some time with us. So you don't have to do a lesson or know how to do any of these things in order to go on a trip. We recommend it, but you don't have to.
That's great. I remember asking that question of Travis Sands. He says, no, Mom. We're just going out there on the skiff. We're not doing this in the grass. We're going to get out there in the free fire zone. Him and I were just laughing up and cutting all about it. I get it. I mean, just get out there and do it. But, some, if they've never cast before, they may feel maybe a little bit intimidated before they jump on the skiff. So I didn't know if you had any classes for that, or you could work with them before they jump on the skiff, how that process all worked naturally.
Yeah, like I said, we certainly can. And we've had some folks that are saying, I'm not ready to go out there. I'm not ready to face the boat and the beach and the wind and the sand and the grass. Let's meet at the soccer field. And we've done that too. We'll put targets out. We, draw a line so you know what's straight, different distances. We'll teach you in the wind, out of the wind, do the whole clock face. And it's a really, really great learning experience for people to feel like they can put their toe in before they have to jump. And it's one of our favorite things to do too, mine especially, just because it's a level set. You get to set a baseline. You get to see where someone's comfortable. You get to see where you get a chance to see their strengths and where there's opportunity, and you can work with them. So it's a very non-pressured environment for people to feel like they can get more comfortable.
So now, do you hold those types of classes on the island, or do you also hold them, off the island at different venues for those looking to maybe in a class type environment, look to learn how to cast or things of that nature?
Well, we're super lucky. We do it all on the island. So people come to us, but we have access to all of the different ways that we would want to either host a class or just do individual lessons. And so we haven't done any classes so far. It's been more interest in, hey, I want to come with, myself and my wife, or just myself, or me and a buddy of mine. So it's been more individually focused. But that doesn't mean that we can't do classes or groups if people have more interest in doing a larger session.
Have you got any weekend-long fly fishing clinic type schools planned? I would think that would make for a great couples thing, to have some of those types of classes that we see established throughout here in Florida and other places. Have you guys considered putting on that type of a weekend-long clinic where you start with them at A and progress through a whole 48-hour period?
It's a great idea, but from the clinic or class perspective, we've not done it with that as the goal. What we have done, though, is we've had several couples now that have said, my husband, wants to go. I don't really fish, but can I come? And so it turns into a weekend long, and actually we've had a couple of 3 days where it was progressively building. And so it becomes a clinic almost,
right?
Just naturally, which is so fun and so rewarding because you see that progression throughout the weekend. And it's like earning your, certificate or your trophy at the end of that weekend or that 3 days where, the fish or the trophy, having had those pictures and gotten a chance to see them slide out of your hands and release them, it's just amazing. So those have been not so much advertised as clinics, but they've become those couples or those, friend weekend clinics that have just naturally done it that way.
Oh, that sounds great. What do you think are some of the common misconceptions or myths about fly fishing for women in particular? And how do you address those?
Good question. My personal opinion, I think the most common misperception or myth about fly fishing just for women is that they don't do it. It's like, well, wait a minute.
Sure.
I'm here to tell you that they do. And, there are some pretty salty, some pretty talented, and some really fishy women out there that have pioneered the sport, for myself and for others.
That's for sure. I've watched them do it.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. And yeah, I'm so incredibly grateful for their passion and their desire to have, really blazed the trail for myself and others. So, if you put that misconception aside or that, fly fishing, even long casts, well, women can't do it. It's like, well, record holder for the longest cast is a woman. So
exactly. It's technique. It's not strength. That's right.
Exactly. So yeah, it's just making sure that women do know that this is something that's available to them. And really the industry has shown that in the last couple of years of where their marketing efforts and their gear efforts and their clothing and their advertising has really taken a significant, I think, turn to the women angler. Right. Several of the big companies have really been doing this in the pursuit of kind of even representation or even split on the water by some of the big names. So you can see now, if you follow, fishing in general or some of those companies, a lot more of their advertisements are not men on the cover. They're not the ones on the websites anymore. They're not the first one that shows up when you click on gear. It's women.
Exactly.
So they're pushing hard for this, which is
I think really it's great.
Fun to see. Yeah.
Can you share some of your success stories and examples of women who've embraced fly fishing and experienced personal growth through the sport?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So like I said, I mentioned, my friend in Colorado, Erin, she's really my first introduction to women in fly fishing. I'd tinkered around a little bit with a few guy friends, but she's the one that said, you know what, let's go. And she is self-taught. She is teaching her two little boys, her and her husband fish. It's her release. It's her soul fulfillment. So I can really say was the person who was my catalyst to get me into it. So, and then, I've got a bunch of women now, Annie, she's a total badass. Sorry if you have to bleep that out, but
it's all right.
Fishing is a way of life for Annie. She's running an entire island by herself in the Bahamas. Fly fishing has become such a central point for her life. And she's doing such amazing things with it. My friend Cheryl, she's a professional casting instructor. She's out there with all the guys and she's telling them how to do this. And she's
whipping
an
them.
absolutely incredible teacher. Yeah. And I've learned so much from her. She's so patient. She's so kind. And man, you let somebody who'll crack the whip, she'll get you that extra 20 to 30 feet real fast. And man, my friend Jenny, she dove into fly fishing not only just a year ago, and she's now stamped more of her passport in the last year to fly fish in saltwater destinations. And she'll even go by herself because she is so dedicated and has not looked back since she picked up a rod.
Oh, that's awesome.
So these are just personal friends of mine that have just taken fishing, and it's just become so woven into who they are and what they do, and it's their passion and they exude it.
What about your mentors? How have they helped you progress in your career?
For sure. Truly, first and foremost, I would say my husband, Jason. The passion and dedication that he has to this is beyond anything that I've ever experienced in my life. And I'm super, super grateful for it because he's very patient with me as I tend to play catch up with his knowledge and skills. But, a couple folks that really have shaped, especially recently, kind of my life in this fly fishing world. Meredith McCord, mentor, she's now a friend. Her willingness to help. She's phenomenal. She's progressing my knowledge and my skills and just the understanding of the industry, but also what makes her so excited. And she instills that sense of lifelong education and giving back. And so she is not only just a phenomenal angler and has really pushed the perception of women in fly fishing specifically in the U.S. and around the world. She's a role model, but she's also a role model as a human being. She's just an incredible person.
I wouldn't want to turn fish with her. She's going to win.
Yeah. Oh, for sure she will. She won't sleep until she does.
Exactly. Relentless.
Yeah. But yeah, and some others. Again, when you think about mentors, a husband-wife power couple is Kyle and Kitri Schaefer. Huge mentors of ours, especially when starting Island Fly with their knowledge of stripers because of the Northeast and their connection in Maine, and now what they're doing and running their unbelievable, beautiful lodge in the Bahamas, and having a family with all of it. So how do they keep their passions fed to keep doing what they're doing and have the energy to do it? And then similar with Abby Schuster up in Maine, we got a chance to go visit her in Martha's Vineyard and see how she's running Kismet. And again, it's the family, it's the passion, it's the how do you find balance to stoke the fire on, really all angles, but keep the perspective of the natural world, the beauty, the conservation. What can we all do to give back to this incredible profession and industry? So they've been huge mentors of mine and ours. So
I bet they have. So how do you see the future of fly fishing evolving for women? You're very heavily involved in the sport with a lot of awesome mentors and others that are in the industry. What opportunities do you foresee in terms of growth, inclusivity, gear that are ripe for innovation? What do you see happening?
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's, those companies that I said are looking for that even gender split, Sims and Orvis, Costa and Yeti, they all came out and actually stated that was their goal. Within 2020 up to 2025, they want to see those numbers increase. So they're pushing it, for sure on their end. But what I thought was really interesting was over the last couple of years, there's been a 31% increase of women as American fly fishing women, which is a double-digit increase in the last 7 years.
That's a lot.
It's an explosion, yeah. And so, another one was that in 2016, more than 2 million women participated in fly fishing, whether it be salt or whether it be fresh water, which is 142,000 more than the previous year. So it's such an explosion of people. It's amazing. So I see this only growing.
This is very true. And there was a lot of preconceived ideas that had to come down, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on to help blow apart some of these preconceived ideas about the sportswomen going fly fishing or just fishing in general. I think it's great. And I'm sure these companies are really looking at this saying, this is a market that in many ways is untapped, or they're looking to expand their footprint in it. So I applaud those efforts.
Absolutely. I think it's really simple to me. We live these very hectic and sometimes chaotic and regimented lives. And when you look at, the time ticking by so quickly, a lot of people are looking for ways to remove themselves from that day-to-day hustle. And fly fishing is one of those things when you have access to it, or even if you don't, but it's the allure of being in the natural world and something that's calming, something that can be still adventurous, something you can share with families, kids, multiple generations. Fly fishing doesn't have a gender in that regard. It's just a release.
That's right.
And so that's where I think, that's where I think that this really has an opportunity, not only just for women, but for anybody who's looking for the opportunity to feel small and have that natural connection with the outdoor world.
Yeah, the fish don't care. They pay no attention to.
They sure don't.
They don't care at all.
Sure don't.
You either presented it right and they strike it, or it was wrong and they swim away. It's that simple.
Yep. Good cast catch fish, though. I will say that.
That's right. That's right. What advice do you have for the ladies, or anyone really, who are interested in starting to fly fish but may feel intimidated? Is it the perceived expense? What do you feel is the biggest roadblock?
I like to say that help helps. And what I mean by that is don't be afraid to ask. It truly benefits you. Just, whether you're intimidated, just ask for help. If you know anybody, your family, friends, local guides, just ask. Because even just starting that conversation, you don't know what you're going to learn. And it could be the most helpful and the most kind of igniting way for you to just get your feet wet a little bit. You don't need to know anything to start. So just ask anybody. I put myself out there to say, I didn't know a lot about this just a few years ago. But if you're willing to ask the question and you're willing to say, this is something I'm interested in, and you start poking around, don't be afraid to ask for help. And typically, especially in the fly fishing world, I found that about nine times out of 10, you're going to get somebody that you're asking really excited to tell you more.
Oh, yeah.
So you're going to learn in that process. Yeah. And of course, if you're intimidated, call, text, DM me. I certainly, I am not the person who is going to say that I'm an expert in any of it, but I want to be that person's resource who is a little shy or a little intimidated, because I'm the first one that says that I screw up my knots. I don't know which, things I need to be doing for A, B, C, X, Y, Z. So I want to be that person's resource who's in that same boat.
Guilty as charged. I make those mistakes myself all the time.
We all do.
We all
do.
But
if you have a network, you can reach out to.
That's right.
Exactly.
Well, what do you, along those same lines, what do you feel are some of the common mistakes or pitfalls that some of the newer anglers, and we can be specific to the ladies if that would help, to fly fishing that they should avoid?
Well, the first one is, like I just said, knowing everything. You don't need to know anything in order to start. So don't feel like, that's a non-starter. Reach out and ask for help. Other ladies too. Whoever you may have access to, myself or others. But, in the beginning, I would say if you want to get specific, because sometimes, depending on how seasoned the person is that you may be asking for help of, you don't need the super fancy or expensive gear. You need function. You need decent gear that can get you started so that you can just decide whether you like it or not. Let alone, you don't want to, spend a ton of money and say this wasn't worth it for me. Or don't even get the gear, just get the clothing to get ready to go out and just learn and do a casting clinic, or, book a half-day trip with a local guide just to say, I'm here to learn, and ask to use their stuff. So don't be afraid to, show up with you being ready to learn, because more often than not, the guides are happy to, show you what they have and teach you on the stuff that they've got. And then, the common mistakes I would also say, if you haven't, gone out with guides before, is your guide's not testing you. Your guide just wants to know what knowledge you have and what's your baseline, so then they can then help. So I think the biggest mistake is people feel like they're supposed to know a lot more than they need to, or they have to talk the talk and walk the walk. But in reality, you need to show up ready to listen to your guides, and you want to be that sponge. Those are kind of my common mistakes that I think that people run into, and can, maybe women specific, get a little intimidated by and maybe shy away from, because they feel like they're supposed to know more or have, more of a baseline skill set to take a half-day trip.
Well, I have a lot of friends in the guide community, and I can say unequivocally that the good ones are guides. They're not drill instructors. So don't fear asking questions or saying, I'm new, teach me. Most of them love that. They love that aspect. Exactly. They'll take you out and they'll show you the predator-prey relationship, all these different things that come into play to be successful. So I wouldn't want to go fishing with a drill instructor. I don't have no use for it.
Exactly. It takes away from the experience.
It does.
You want more of that symbiotic relationship. Yeah. You're the guide. You teach me.
If somebody was to jump on your skiff, fishing in those waters, how far do you feel that they need to be able to cast that fly to be effective? Is it 40 feet, 50 feet? What do you feel really gives them the best chance for success?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. About that 40-foot range. If you've got more than that, obviously we can get into, deeper water, and we can do more target fishing, and we can really get you, the distance that you might want. But 40 feet is a pretty good target to go for if you're practicing before a trip, because that'll get you through most wind. It can punch you through things. So 40 foot's a great target.
What do you feel is the biggest mistake most anglers make that reduces their strike ratio? Is it they're making too much noise on the boat? It's casting skills. When you're watching your anglers on the bow, what do you feel is the number one mistake that they're making that they can at least be aware of before they jump on the skiff with you?
Yeah. So number one and number two, I would say number one is good cast catch fish. So if you've got a good cast, or you're pretty, decent at getting it, at least the distance and some accuracy, you're going to have a greater strike ratio for sure. Not to say that every cast has to be perfect by any means, because we're not. We're human. Yeah. We all do it. But yeah, good cast is going to be the number one to get you into some fish. But the really close second, in terms of even before you put a cast in the water, is the noise on the boat. It's slamming the cooler top. It's dropping something on the hard bottom. It's, your phone's going off and the ringer's vibrating the whole of the hull.
Stealth
it sounds a little, technical, but it really matters, because sound travels so far underwater.
Oh, it does, and it will flush them out like quail. They are gone.
You got it. So, one of the things that, if you're new to fishing on a boat, it's just that boat etiquette of, if you're doing, two anglers, help with lines, don't slam things down. Don't, grab your beer or your water and drop it, the cooler top, because you're not the one fishing. So it's really being conscious about those things.
And along those same lines, I think some have the misconception that they can't ask questions and things of that nature from being so quiet. Your voice talking back and forth, that's not the issue. That's not the problem at all. You can talk and carry on all you want. It's that a hatch falling, it's you dropping something, anything that travels through the deck is what you're looking to avoid. So don't think that you can't, everybody has to walk around and go, shh, gotta be quiet. No, that's not the case. It's not the case at all. Sound bounces right off the surface of the water. That's not the issue. It's the dropping of the cooler. It's the boat bilge pump coming on. It's all these little things that really create that type of situation that many may not be aware of, or they've already fished offshore where it was really not that big of a deal.
Right. Exactly. you're going to decrease your overall experience if you start making a lot of noise.
Very
exactly.
Quickly.
Yep.
What do you think are some of the most effective ways for the ladies in particular, or anybody for that matter, to improving their skills for saltwater fly fishing? Is it practicing their cast? Is it using one of those yarn trainers, which I have? Love that toy. What do you feel?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of trying to mimic as much of what you're going to do on the water as you possibly can, even if you're not on the water. So that means if you have your own gear, you have your own, rods, lines, reels, go out there. I'm a big fan of mimicking whatever fly that you're gonna throw at whatever trip or where you're going next, and just take the hook off. And so you're getting used to what does that fly feel like in the air, the weight of it, does it catch a lot of wind? And I love like, for instance, if you have access to a golf course or a soccer field or just, your backyard, if it's big enough, try to cast all the way around the clock face. Change your body, change the direction, hit your 9s, your 12s, your 3s, and even turn to your 6. Not necessarily you'll do that on a boat, but wherever the wind is, just get used to going in all of the angles around you, mimicking as much of what could possibly show up in your experience as possible, so that you have better chances when you're actually going out there and doing it.
That's so true. And that it's muscle memory. The difference between an amateur and professional golfer is how many balls he hits in a day.
You got it.
Same with
and
casting.
They're not doing it with different clubs. They're doing it with their clubs, and they know the weight, they know the feel, all of it.
Yeah, some of these flies for saltwater, crab patterns, can be like, as I used to use the analogy of, it's like trying to cast a feathered brick. They are not very aerodynamic. They do not want to turn over, and you've got to, it's one thing to throw a minnow pattern that's fairly streamlined and aerodynamic. And now you start tying on a big crab fly. That's a different animal. You've got to learn how to turn that over. That takes practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you start talking about getting into things that are bigger, like what tarpon like to eat, and then you feel like you're casting a sail. Trying to figure that out too. So
right, and at a target that's usually further away at the same time.
Of course, yep. So be dynamic with it. That's what I like to do. Make it fun. Make it a game.
What message or words of encouragement do you have for the ladies who are considering taking up fly fishing and pursuing their passion in the outdoors?
It's a great question. I wholeheartedly believe that this is truly a world that is an untapped potential for lifelong joy and fulfillment.
I agree.
And so any way that, especially ladies, I personally really fill my cup with lady time. It's just one of the things in my life that I try to prioritize, and specifically fly fishing in the saltwater. It's an amazing way to feel small in nature, and that experience and that humbleness that it gives you, as well as having a connection with other women that are out there doing what you love doing and are doing it unapologetically, and you can be so yourself. It's just one of the most purest joys. And it's exactly, that's what I was going to just end with, is just do it. Don't overthink it. Just show up, ask for help, and don't look back, because it can be one of the most rewarding experiences you'll ever have in your life.
Lastly, and you're probably thinking, oh, thank goodness.
Absolutely not.
Someone wants to reach you and they go, Ashley, I want to go fishing with you, or set up a class. How can they reach you and get that process started?
Great, sure. Website for sure, islandfly.net. You can go on Hey Ladies, but there's lots of ways on the website that'll drive you to how to contact me or contact us. I'm on Instagram, so Ashley Outside 00. You'll see all the fun fishing adventures that we take part in and the stuff we're excited about. DM me on Instagram, send an email. You can certainly call or text. I am so excited to hear from anybody that's willing to go out and just ask questions. Doesn't even have to be, I want to book a trip. It's just, I want to ask a couple questions and have you be a resource. So that it makes me so excited to try to give back to this amazing world of fly fishing. And any way I can do it, I'm happy to.
Well, we're definitely looking forward to having some of your content and sharing your tips and tactics and stuff with us on Flats Nation. And definitely we will post up on Flats Nation where you can get a hold of Ashley at the same time. So that will be great. Thank you for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. I was really looking forward to recording this one with you, because I do feel that the ladies feel like they're underserved in this sport, which should not be the case. You don't need to be 6'6", 240 and a linebacker to be able to fly fish. Sorry. You don't need me.
No, you don't. But we're changing that. We're changing it. It's changing rapidly, and appreciate the opportunity to get a chance to talk about it. So I hope it gets some other women out there excited.
Oh, yes, very much so. So thanks for joining us today. And as I say, as Peter said in John 21:3, I'm going fishing, and maybe you should do the same. Thank you for joining us today. I do appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, we hope you enjoyed our show today and found it both educational and entertaining at the same time. If you or your company would like to join the team on Flats Nation for a podcast or other coverage, feel free to drop us a quick note at info@flatsnation.com. And now, here's the rest of the song to run the skiff back home with. Tight lines and God bless.